authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us, from personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
Goes on to say, Cassie has left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry
and all you have to prove is one incident with possession with intent to distribute. You have the personal assistant saying that they were asked also to bring narcotics to give it to Sean Combs so it can be delivered during the free calls. And even Brendan Paul even said that
not guilty of leading a criminal enterprise, not guilty of racketeering conspiracy. They will now move to the other four counts, two of them on sex trafficking and on and we have not guilty now on count 2, which was sex trafficking of Cassandra Ventura. Sean Combs has been found not guilty of sex trafficking when it comes to his former
not guilty on the sex trafficking.
There was a real debate that the jury heard over the course of the last 2 months about
not guilty for Pepe,
and
y'all.
Coercion and the complications of deciding when an 11-year relationship between Combs and Cassie Ventura may have become a criminal one. And the jury decided
that it was not.
It was not criminal sex trafficking when Sean Combs committed what his attorneys freely admitted was domestic abuse, as you saw in that video. He has been found not guilty now on racketeering conspiracy, not guilty on sex trafficking of Cassie Ventura. He has been found Three, transportation for the persons, for the transportation for the
Go wipe your mouth, Ellie.
Purposes of prostitution.
Guilty on.
Combs
will be convicted
for the
on
purposes
the
of prostitution. These charges carry a maximum penalty of up to 10 years in prison. So we do have a split verdict. Sean Combs has been found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, not guilty of sex trafficking Cassandra Ventura, but he has been found guilty on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And we're waiting for one more count, the sex trafficking of Jane. And just now the jury has decided that Sean Combs is not guilty of sex trafficking. His former girlfriend, who testified under the pseudonym Jane. So the jury has now believed that the relationships that Sean Combs had with his former girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane, were not criminal, did not involve sex trafficking. All Sean Combs has been convicted of here is transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And Kira, those did seem to be the most evident crimes that Sean Combs committed. We heard testimony from the male escorts. The jury heard about the cash that they were paid, and as prosecutors told them, they were not in those hotel rooms for scintillating conversation. Sean Combs.
All right, y'all. Sean Diddy Combs acquitted of most serious counts, convicted on prostitution charges. Sean Diddy Combs was not found guilty of the most serious charges he faced. Sean Diddy Combs was acquitted of trafficking and racketeering after a closely followed high-profile federal trial in New York City. He was convicted. Okay, the split verdict was read on Wednesday, July 2nd, today. He faces up to 10 years in prison after he was convicted on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Had Combs had been convicted on the charges of trafficking and racketeering, he could have spent the rest of his life in prison. Instead, it's relatively good news for the music mogul. Oh, he's back to being a music mogul now, not the hip-hop disgrace music mogul, okay? Who has spent the past several months behind bars and whose public reputation has taken a massive hit in the wake of the charges. Combs' star-powered defense team successfully argued that prosecutors have failed to prove their serious charges. Over the course of the trial, which began in May, prosecutors called 34 witnesses over the course of 29 days of testimony. Among them was Cassandra Cassie Ventura, Combs' ex, with whom he was in a relationship for 11 years. Prosecutors sought to prove that she had been coerced into participating in freak-off king nights, which were elaborate performances with male ex-workers. Okay, Ventura, who testified while 8.5 months pregnant, also delivering her baby during the trial, gave several days of testimony describing abuse and detailing the freak-offs. Combs' attorneys argued throughout the trial that the actual encounters have been consensual and introduced several exhibits, including text messages, into evidence intended to reinforce that argument. Though Combs was acquitted on the most serious counts, he still faces several dozen lawsuits accusing him of actual misconduct, meaning his legal battles will continue. Still being found not guilty in federal court is a massive victory for Combs, who now sports gray hair, having spent the months leading up to his highly anticipated trial behind bars. Diddy! People are saying money talks. Even so, God is his ultimate judge. Part 2, Judgment Day is coming. This is not the end for Diddy. It will get worse, says Ginger. Dwayne says he might serve half of the 10 years until Uncle Trump pardons him for early release. Money bought that whole case to a quick ending. Heather, absolutely not. I agree 100%. Follow the money. Kyla says he's not going to survive the 10 years. When the justice system fails us, leave it to our prisoners to hold them in proper justice. Trust. Lola says, yeah, pretty much knew that it was going to happen. Hope he gets all the 10 years. Michaela says, what? Acquitted trafficking.
Guilty of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. Not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, not guilty of sex trafficking. Kira?
All right, let's put this in perspective now that we know where Sean Combs has been found guilty and non-guilty. Let's put into perspective, Brian, on time he will serve. What are we looking at now with regard to years? Of course, we should point out there will be an appeal. He's got plenty of money to do that. But let's take it from where it stands right now.
Kira, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. I'm not even sure if I would say there would be an appeal, because for Sean Combs and his defense team, this is a massive win. 3 of the counts that had a life sentence possibility are gone. When it comes to transportation to engage in prostitution, the minimum is nothing. There's a theoretical possibility that he walks out on probation. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, but the max is 10 years. Even if you were to take both sentences, and he's not going to get 10 years, they're to look at his criminal history, mitigating circumstances, aggravating circumstances. And I would assume that he gets somewhere in the middle ground, maybe like 3 to 5 years, 3 to 6 years, possible through that sentencing range for each count. Sean Combs going to trial where he was facing life and being able to walk out with something under 10 years, well under 10 years possibly, that is a victory. Will he appeal? Sure, that's his right to do so, but I don't see an appeal here. I think you take this as a win. You serve the few years that you may get, and you be happy that you didn't get life. I'm somewhat shocked as to the trafficking for Cassie. I thought that might have been a stronger case for the government. I didn't think that they had the RICO, and I definitely didn't think they had the Jane trafficking. But this is, I think in only so many words, and I keep saying it, I think this is a positive result for Sean Combs and his team.
I'm being told now Combs is hugging his lawyer at this very moment. Clearly, he's seeing it as you are seeing it as well. You know, we should point out, Brian, let's look at bigger picture here. He is a music producer. He created a brand around him.
All right, the United States versus Sean Combs, y'all. Not guilty on count 1, which was the very serious racketeering conspiracy, right? Not guilty count 2, trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. He was found guilty of count 3, transportation to engage in prostitution. Not guilty again on the trafficking, force, fraud, or coercion. Guilty on another charge of transportation to engage in prostitution.
Himself, he was a big part of bringing hip hop into the mainstream. There is an entire entertainment business side to this. How do you see, from your experience, this win, as you are saying, for Sean Combs? How will it impact his business empire?
I think, for lack of a better term, there was always going to be
and that's all they want to do, impact his business empire. You see what I'm saying? And unfortunately, Sean Combs put himself in a trick bag to where they could definitely, jeopardize the future of his, money, his business, his success, his career. So
a blemish on Sean Combs' career. I think people are going to look at this in 2 different ways. In one way, they're going to say that Sean Combs probably had a history of getting into trouble with the law and somehow getting out from underneath it. They're going to look at past events through both civil and criminal complaints and say, you know what, he's always had good lawyers or whatever it may be, and he's gotten away with bad charges, especially looking at that Intercontinental video. But I think the other view of this is going to be is that he was tried by a jury of his peers. All of the information, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between was shown to these 12 people, and they did not see the criminal enterprise. They did not see the force, fraud, and coercion. And I think the trafficking to engage in prostitution, I think that's going to be a lighter blemish on his career in terms of the totality of what we saw, as to like, okay, so he paid for people to go across state lines to have consensual sex. And I think consensual sex will be a big part of the conversation based on how the verdict came out. And so do I think he takes a big knock in terms of this case? Yes, but we've seen Sean Combs rebrand and come back from a lot of things, and that is a possibility here.
But let's put it into the context, Aaron Katursky, of the Me Too movement. I don't think anybody can forget the video, the surveillance. Video that we saw over and over again in that hotel hallway of Sean Combs barely naked in a towel, kicking and dragging Cassie Ventura.
It's an unforgettable piece of video, and it was one of the most visceral pieces of evidence that the jury saw during the course of a nearly 2-month trial, Kira. And the defense freely admitted what's depicted on it is domestic violence, but they said all along he's not charged with domestic violence. The defense insisted, even though the defense did not put on much of a case, called no witnesses, that what was depicted was not sex trafficking, and the jury seems to have agreed. And Sean Combs is clearly taking this outcome of a split verdict, guilty on only the transportation for the purposes of prosecution, as a win. The jury has been excused. As the 8 men and 4 women stood to leave their seats, Sean Combs made praying hands in their direction and bowed his head slightly as if to say thank you. When the outcome was read aloud in court, Combs put his hands in the air and looked to the ceiling, clearly taking this as a win that he was acquitted on the most serious charges he faced, Kira.
And now I understand, Aaron, his attorneys are calling for him to actually be released today. Could that happen?
Well, it could happen because he has already served about a year's time, a little shy of a year, and there will be a sentencing date. What the defense is likely arguing is that he is now no longer has any anything to do with a violent crime. Transportation for the purposes of prostitution carries a maximum sentence of 10 years, a minimum of nothing. So it will be up to the judge to decide, but where he is no longer accused of a violent crime until he is formally sentenced. If that happens, it's possible he could walk right out the golden doors here. Certainly a number of his and others are waiting. Members of certainly a number of his supporters and others are waiting. Members certainly a number of his supporters and others are waiting. Members certainly a number of his supporters and others are waiting. Members Certainly a number of his supporters and others are waiting. Members of Certainly a number of his supporters and others are waiting. Members.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck's going on with my thing. I'm over here trying to fix my thumbnail, but my computer's like lagging and dragging and staggering.
One who
Let me
has
try to
been in
get
the
it together.
courtroom for cases that involve domestic violence. Knowing how he treated these women. And now looking at this outcome, how he's been acquitted on the most serious charges, your overall thoughts moving forward about what this says about the Me Too movement, the power of a music mogul when he has money, when he has fame. Your thoughts?
So So, my thoughts, I think, I try to go beyond just being an attorney. And I'll try to sidestep that and just talk as a man, as an adult. I think there can be no mixing of words as to what Sean Combs is when it comes to the treatment of women.
I'm about to go in here and work on my Wi-Fi box. Y'all, I don't know what the hell.
Full stop.
Wi-Fi booster.
Period. There's no question as to what we saw in terms of the strength of the women who took the stand and testified about the abuse that happened to them. There's no question about the photos we saw of Cassie in terms of in terms of the bruising of her body, the bruise.
Okay, yeah. Let me go in here and work on my my Wi-Fi box. Stupid shit. I don't know what the fuck going on with my Wi-Fi boosters?
In terms of the bruising of her body, the bruise.
It's just bending the knees. Daddy, you know the words. Do be careful.
In terms of the bruising of her body, the bruise.
Go play. Go play.
Daddy pig.
In terms of the bruising of her body, the in terms of the bruising of her body, the bruising of her face, and the violence in that Intercontinental Hotel. Full stop. There's no justification of that. There's no explanation of that. And I think in terms of the Me Too movement, there should be strength in the fact that those women were believed in terms of what they said. Putting my attorney cap hat back on for a moment. I think the difficulty of this and what may be perceived, and I hope it's a perception and not a reality of the Me Too movement. Of the Me Too movement taking a step back. Of the Me Too movement taking a step back. Based on this verdict, I would believe to trafficking in RICO, that misstep and misperception.
Okay, y'all, I turned my
is what led
Wi-Fi pods back in.
The SDNY
My internet acts right. I don't know why it's not acting right.
has phenomenal prosecutors, has a phenomenal office.
Get you a coloring book.
And their record speaks for itself, but I think
Get a coloring book.
in this case, they overestimated the
So let me refresh my stuff, y'all. I don't know what's going on.
My name's Travis Sarno. This will be my 12th year in Major League Baseball. I'm Chase Sarno, former Major League shortstop and co-founder of Darno Athletics Baseballism Academy. This partnership with WM has been a godsend. It
has been heavily engaged in this from the beginning. There's been constant communication between
thoughts now about this case, Bernarda. I asked Brian this question as an attorney who has been involved with domestic violence cases. I want to ask you as well your thoughts on what this means for the victims.
For the victims, I think this is a slap in the face for the victims. I think this is going to deter victims from coming forward and telling their story and being the voice for the voiceless, in the sense of representing other victims that are not willing to come forward. I know that for a fact, I'm sure that the prosecution right now is very upset with this verdict, because they definitely put a lot of time into this prosecution, into this investigation. And they also did a lot of comforting of trying to give strength to these women, to Jane and to Cassie, to strength to these women, to Jane and to Cassie, to come forward. Strength to these women, to Jane and to Cassie, to come forward, to show their face, to share their story. And this is not just like any other regular domestic violence case or just any type of abuse case. You're dealing that they were stepping forward to speak against a music mogul, a person who had the key to New York City, one of the most powerful people in the industry. So just think of how scared they were to come forward and to tell their story, and scared of what could happen once they came forward, because I'm sure with social media and people talking in the news that they have received a lot of threats and people commenting about who they are and what they've done and that they are liars, but they and they alone know what happened to them. And they had prosecutors that believed in them and believed their story and became their voice.
Aaron, I understand court has now been adjourned. Combs was escorted out. A massive applause was heard from within the courtroom.
The judge
Okay,
said
guys,
court is adjourned.
I'm
Now,
so sorry. My
Kira,
internet.
he's going to give the parties until 1 p.m. Eastern time to submit letters arguing for or against his release on bail. The judge left the bench until later on this afternoon, when he'll give his decision. Once the judge was off the bench, Sean Combs was escorted out by the marshals. The judge told him he's going to have to cool his heels in the courthouse for a bit. But as he left the courtroom, there were applause from the gallery, some cheers in the gallery, where members of his family have been in steadfast vigil. His mother here most days, his twin daughters back, his sons have been here most days. They cheered for their father after he was acquitted of the most serious charges that he faces, still convicted of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. And now we await the decision as to whether he's going to be released on bail. If he is, he will walk out to a crowd that includes people holding up Sean John T-shirts and other supporters who have been here saying, "Where's the Rico?" They've been shouting that into the street for weeks, and they would certainly welcome this verdict if he is to walk out those golden doors, Kira. For the jury, they really had to make a difficult decision, not just on the racketeering conspiracy, but as the defense said the women that Combs was accused of trafficking were also his long-term girlfriends. Cassie Ventura with him for 11 years. Jane with him for more than 3 years. And the defense tried to argue that they were consensual relationships, that they were in it just as much as he was because that was their lifestyle, even though they freely admitted the polyamorous swingers kink was not everybody's cup of tea. But he said these women were in it, and it required the jury to make distinctions between consent and coercion and love and control and free will, and in the end they acquit on the most serious charges that carried a minimum sentence of 15 years, acquitting on sex trafficking in addition to the racketeering conspiracy, Kira.
Bernard, I want to bring you back in on that. As Aaron was saying, this really came down to violence and fear versus love, infidelity, and jealousy. We are watching the doors now to see if lawyers will be coming out and coming to the mics. But Bernarda, Sean Combs may be acquitted of the most serious charges here. But let's talk about the impact all of this will have on ongoing civil cases.
Yes, so you have to think, so even though he was acquitted of the most serious charge in this criminal case, when we're talking about a civil case, it's a different burden. The criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. When you're dealing with civil cases, it's by preponderance of the evidence, 51% versus 49%. But then again, with a civil case, he's just at risk of losing his empire in terms of money, but his liberty is no longer at stake. So he can live to fight those cases outside of jail bars.
You bring up a good point, because if he would have been found guilty of racketeering, that could have forced him to forfeit all his businesses, right?
Absolutely. So if he would have been found guilty of racketeering conspiracy and of the sex trafficking, anything that was used in order to facilitate this crime. So, for example, his mansions in Florida and his mansion in Los Angeles would have been at risk that it would have been taken away from the government, since there was evidence.
Okay, so he is still able, because of the non-guilty on racketeering, to keep businesses that are still in place.
That was put forth, having to deal with that
not to be jeopardized by the racketeering. Businesses, homes, assets. Businesses, homes, and assets for Diddy will not be compromised due to the racketeering found not guilty.
Was put forth, having to deal with that some of the sex.
So it's really now just up to seeing and saying what the judge will say. What the judge will say.
Was put forth, having to deal with that some of the sex.
What? I turned it back on.
Was put forth, having to deal with that some of the sex.
Which one? Galaxy A15? You want to come in here? Close the door.
Trafficking took place inside of those homes. So he would have been at risk of losing that, and also a lot of his businesses and his money.
In his closing argument, one of Combs' defense attorneys asked jurors to summon the courage to acquit Combs, who conceded he could be violent, jealous, and a drug user, but whose lawyers argued the case is badly, badly exaggerated to make Combs like something he is not. Do you think that's what happened, Brian Buckmeyer?
I think, I don't know. This one I'm still trying to wrap my mind around, and I apologize. I'm trying to get information from different people as I go about this, trying to get information from people inside the court.
All right, so what we are seeing and hearing. Live update. Sean Combs acquitted of sex trafficking but found guilty on lesser charges. The music mogul celebrated after being found not guilty of trafficking and racketeering conspiracies. He was convicted of transporting people for prostitution and could be released on bond right now until sentence. Here's the latest. Sean Combs was acquitted on Wednesday, today, of trafficking and racketeering charges, but convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution after an 8-week federal trial. A jury in Manhattan found Mr. Combs, 55, not guilty of the most serious charges against him. 2 former girlfriends, Cassandra Ventura and a woman who testified pseudonymously as Jane, into unwanted acts with male prostitutes, aided by a team of Planned employees. Ultraviolet, a women's rights organization, made a statement in response to the Sean Combs verdict. This is a decisive moment for our justice system, one which threatens to undo the sacrifice of courageous survivors who stepped forward to share their stories in this trial, as well as to all those abused by Diddy who weren't able to, said Arisha Hatch, the organization's interim executive director. Today's verdict is not just a stain on a criminal justice system that for decades has failed to hold accountable abusers like Diddy. It's also an indictment of a culture in which not believing women and victims of sexual assault remains endemic. We will continue to stand with the brave women and men who took great risk to reveal the person Diddy really is. So Julia Jacobs from the courthouse. What is a bit remarkable is that yesterday evening, the jury said it was deadlocked on the racketeering conspiracy charge, which accused Sean Combs of running a criminal enterprise responsible for crimes over 2 decades. It said that there were unpersuadable opinions on both sides. Okay, so neither side of the jury were able to be persuaded for the more serious crimes. Then this morning, jurors came to a full verdict after less than an hour of deliberation. So apparently the judge, he went along with the Allen motion that the prosecutors wanted the jurors to hurry up, push things along so they could go and, celebrate their 4th of July with their families, okay? Because the jury was not convinced that Mr. Combs was responsible for trafficking, you can see how it would have been uncertain on racketeering as well, right? A significant part of the alleged conspiracy, according to the prosecutors, was based on accusations that Mr. Combs' employees helped facilitate trafficking. Outside the courthouse, Douglas Whitger, a lawyer for Cassandra Ventura, said he was pleased that Mr. Combs had been held accountable for something. Mr. Whitger said he's finally been held responsible for 2 federal crimes, something that he's never faced in life. The former girlfriends of Sean Combs, Cassandra Ventura and Jane, were not coerced into freakouts and hotel nights, also known as King Nights, extended sessions with male escorts over a period of years. Through vigorous cross-examinations of witnesses, Mr. Combs' lawyer pointed to text messages in which the women conveyed enthusiasm for the sexual encounters. The women testified that they were telling Mr. Combs what they knew he wanted to hear and that they were stuck in a manipulative and controlling relationship. Bottom line, the jury did not view Mr. Combs' treatment of his girlfriends as trafficking. The jury in Sean Combs' trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial, which revealed some internal conflict during deliberations, was a racially diverse group of 8 men and 4 women who range in age from 30 to 74 and live in Manhattan, Westchester County, and the Bronx. The court has not released the names of the jurors, which is common in high-profile trials where their safety is a concern. On Wednesday, the jury announced that it found Mr. Combs not guilty of the most serious charges against him, trafficking and racketeering conspiracy, while convicting him of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. So one of the transportation to engage in prostitutions were not dropped. They were both found guilty. Okay, he was convicted of both of those charges. Both of those charges each carry a sentence of 10 years apiece. So depending on how the judge wants to run that, he can run it concurrently or consecutively, right? Concurrent means to stand together. Consecutive means to run alone and serve each sentence once they finish back to back. Okay. So I don't see how this is necessarily such a big win. You know what I'm saying? He's still got 2 felony charges, which are ex-crime charges. Diddy may have to register as an ex-offender. Okay? Let me take a look at that. If you are convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, do you have to register as an ex-offender? If you are convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, do you have to register as a sex offender? Let's ask Siri. Okay. Generally, a conviction for transportation to engage in prostitution under federal law like 18 USC 2421 requires registration as a ex-offender under the Ex-Offender Registration and Notification Act. So Diddy will have to register as a ex-offender under the Ex-Offender Registration and Notification Act. Registration requirements can vary depending on the state laws. Okay. Convictions of under state laws for prostitution or solicitation of prostitution generally do not require ex-offender registration unless the offense involved sexual assault or exploitation of a minor. So he may or may not have to register. Okay. Human trafficking, which can involve transportation for prostitution, often results in ex-offender registration due to the severity of the crime and its connection to organized criminal activity, especially when minors are involved. So being that minors were not involved and they did not, I'm not sure if they're gonna say the assault on Cassie was anything sexual, but to make Diddy qualified to register as an ex-offender. Okay, that's still for debate. We're gonna have to keep an eye on that, sippers, and see. Thank you guys so much for sipping tea with Tanisha. We are live. Diddy convicted and acquitted at the same damn time. What will say the judge for sentencing? Will he get a maximum of 10 years on each charge, each conviction, or will he get the lesser of the 2? So let's ask Siri. If you're convicted on 2 charges of sexual, hold on. There's so much crap going on with Diddy. Hold on. Let me see. If you're convicted of 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution, what can your sentencing look like? A conviction for 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution can lead to significant penalties. Each count carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison and the possibility of fines. If the individuals were minors, the penalties could be even more severe. Being that they were not minors, Diddy does not have to worry about that. Minors were not entered into this case.
Each count of transportation to engage in prostitution carries a maximum of 10 years in prison. This offense is often prosecuted under 18 U.S.C. 2421, which prohibits transporting individuals across state lines with the intent that they engage in prostitution or other sexual activity. Fines, along with imprisonment, individuals convicted of these offenses may also face substantial fines. So Diddy has multiple accounts. He has 2 charges that he was convicted under transportation of prostitution, right? When multiple counts are involved, the sentences can be served consecutively, one after the other, or concurrently at the same time, potentially leading to a longer total prison sentence. Okay?
By coming forward with her experience, Cassie's attorney, Doug Wigdor, goes on to say, Cassie has left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry and the fight for justice. We must repeat with no reservation that we believe and support our client, who showed exemplary courage throughout this trial. She testified for 4 days, often quite emotionally so, giving graphic, explicit detail of what she said she was made to do. And Sean Combs did not deny the facts of the freak-offs. Everything that happened in those hotel rooms did not get challenged by the defense. The defense simply saw it differently, as something that went on in a personal, consensual relationship, not sex trafficking. And that's how the outcome is reflected now, Kira.
Bernardo, I want to go on to read another part of that statement on behalf of Cassie Ventura's attorney, saying she displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that has persisted for decades without repercussion. This case proved that change is long overdue, and we will continue to fight on behalf of survivors. 2 things that stood out to me: powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that persists, and change that is long overdue. Your thoughts?
Power and money. You can buy yourself out of a conviction. Let's be honest that if Sean Combs wasn't able to get the team that he got and pay for that defense team and experts and investigators to help defend himself, that we would have had a different outcome today. But money and power, that you can still get away with crimes if you have money and power. But I have to say, I was in the courtroom for Cassie's testimony, and she was a strong, strong witness. You can tell that the courage that she had, the strength that she exhibited. I mean, when she spoke and when she would cry from time to time, when she revisited those freak-offs and when she revisited those times when Sean Combs brutally beat her, and to see her in court sitting down, showing the strength and courage that she was able to overcome this. I think one of the most strongest moments that brought people to tears is when she said at some point that she went home and she told her husband, "You can do this without me," and that she wanted to cross the street and commit suicide because of what she had been through. But I'm glad that Cassie has been able to pick herself up and has been able to move on, taking it day by day, because it does show the strength that she got as a result of coming forward. That coming forward helped to bring closure to her.
Bernarda, thank you. Aaron, getting more insight from Sean Combs inside that courtroom, saying this coming from journalists in the press room. He was overcome with emotion as the verdict was read. His feet were visibly shaking throughout the reading of the verdict.
He has been an emotional defendant throughout the entire case. In fact, at one point, the judge had to admonish his attorney that Combs was gesturing and trying to make eyes with jurors as if to attempt to influence them when they were hearing certain testimony. And the judge made him sit straight and silent throughout much of the testimony. But as the verdict was being read, he started gesturing. He got down on the floor after it was over to kneel in prayer. Applause broke out into the courtroom. And I'm struck, Kira, the crowd has gathered here outside And in the windows of the upper floors, courthouse employees are peering down to look at the streetscape below as more people rush toward these doors in anticipation of a possible release on bail sometime later on today, Kira.
And as we wait to hear what the outcome of that is, of course, if indeed the judge decides he could be released today, Brian Buckmeyer, let's talk about the jury makeup here and how it influenced this case, you think. We talked about the fact that it was 8 men, 4 women. Your thoughts on the number of men in this case versus women and how you see that influencing what happened here?
Yes, I know oftentimes when we look at jurors, we look at race or gender. And yes, there's a possibility that the number of men in this case could have been beneficial to Sean Combs in terms of trying to decide what this relationship was like. But I think probably more importantly than race or gender would be age. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to the conversation as to whether or not these were consensual relationships, which appears to be at the heart of the jury's verdict in terms of saying, yes, we saw that you brought these people across state lines for prostitution, but we don't believe there was force, fraud, or coercion for trafficking, and we don't believe that there was a criminal enterprise or that there was not 2 predicate acts. Right? I think a large part of the not believing comes down to consent. And what I find, at least when I talk to a jury or just talk to people in general, is there's a big divide in terms of what is consent when you talk to someone who is 45. And when you have a jury where more than half of them are 51 years to 74 years old. And even if you go even below that, there's a number of people who are in their 40s. I think the conversation and the argument that Mark Agnifilo and his team were having about what it means to consent works for people in that age demographic. I think if we had a jury that was predominantly in their 20s or early 30s, this argument of consent would be very different. So while I do see that there is value in looking at the gender or the sex of the jurors, I think the age told us a lot more based on the arguments we saw.
Bernarda, you think it was smart that Sean Combs did not take the stand?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If Sean Combs would have taken the stand, this case would have become a deliberation of whether this jury believed what Sean Combs had to say, whether his demeanor came off as one as credible. Also, you have to think if Sean Combs were to testify, there was a lot of evidence that the prosecution was not able to get in their case in chief because they were missing a link. And that link would have been Sean Combs. So they would have been able to get that evidence in had Sean Combs testified. So it would have changed the deliberation process, and we would have probably been looking at a completely different verdict. Also got to think, how would he be able to explain in terms of the brutal beating of Cassie and of Jane on that particular occasion?
Aaron, do you think we'll hear from the family? Sean Combs' mother, Janice, was in the courtroom along with his sons, his daughters. Are they expected to speak? Do you think they will speak?
I'm not sure. They haven't yet during the course of this trial, but the cars that they've been using to transport themselves to and from the courthouse are now pulling up to the front here, and they should be walking out those golden doors any moment. They may opt to wait until they know whether Combs is going to get released on bail, as his defense attorney argued he should be. And Combs almost seemed confident that the judge would grant it. He mouthed and said aloud to members of his family in the gallery, "I'm coming home, baby."
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.